The judge was ready to sentence him until she heard his name, and the whole courtroom stood. It was supposed to be a short hearing. One of those cases the court squeezes in between the real ones. A man caught sleeping behind a grocery store near Toledo, Ohio. No weapons, no drugs, no one hurt. Just a trespassing charge and a resisting arrest report written in barely a paragraph. But when the deputies walked him in, heads turned. His coat was too big. The sleeves swallowed his hands. He had on an old army fatigue shirt underneath, faded, with the name Braxton stitched on the chest. One pant leg was tucked into a worn combat boot, the other dragged behind him, torn and muddy. He looked like he hadn't seen a bed in months. The bailiff announced, "Docket number 32751, State versus Leonard Braxton." And in that moment, something shifted. The judge glanced up, then looked again. "Did you say Braxton?" she asked. "Leonard Braxton," the bailiff repeated, glancing at the paperwork. "Age 62. Judge Harper didn't respond right away. She set the folder down. Her eyes lingered on the man before her, unmoving, hollow-eyed, staring somewhere past the floor. The courtroom was still. The public defender assigned that morning, young guy named Owen Price, barely out of law school, cleared his throat. "Your Honor, Mr. Braxton is requesting release under his own recognizance. He has no prior violent charges. Arresting officers noted he didn't strike anyone, just didn't want to leave the property." But the judge held up her hand. "Mr. Braxton, can you hear me?" The man raised his head just enough to make eye contact. "Yes, ma'am," he said, voice like gravel on pavement. That's when a man in the back row stood up. No one asked him to. No one prompted it. But then another stood, and another. Some wore jackets with service patches. A woman in the corner had a Navy emblem on her scarf. They didn't say anything. They just stood. Even the bailiff, usually stone-faced, straightened and slowly rose from behind his podium. The courtroom didn't know what it was watching, but it felt it. Judge Harper took a breath. Her voice softened. "Mr. Braxton, are you the same Leonard Braxton from the 1991 Kuwait rescue mission? 3rd Battalion, Bravo Company?" He nodded. "Used to be." But the man who once led a rescue in the middle of a sandstorm was now here, standing trial for sleeping near a trash bin. At first, it was just a murmur, a few quiet exchanges between people in the gallery. Did she say Kuwait? Leonard Braxton? That's him? Wait, I thought he was... By the time the clerk pulled up a file on her monitor and passed it to the judge, the courtroom was leaning forward like someone had hit pause on everything else. Even the prosecutor, a sharp woman named Denise Rowan, known for never getting flustered, looked like she'd forgotten what page she was on. Judge Harper stared at the screen, her brow furrowed. "Mr. Braxton, I just want to make sure I'm reading this correctly. You received the Silver Star, 2 Bronze Stars, and a Joint Service Commendation Medal?" Lenny's voice barely carried. "Didn't count 'em, ma'am." Price, his court-appointed attorney, leaned in. "Sir, you were awarded those? You never mentioned any of this." Lenny didn't even blink. "Didn't figure it mattered. Ain't like you can trade medals for a place to sleep." That line hit hard. Even Denise, the prosecutor, set her pen down. A man in the gallery slowly stepped forward. He was tall, maybe in his late 40s, wearing a worn leather jacket. "Permission to approach, Your Honor?" She looked up. "Identify yourself." "Keith Murray, Your Honor, U.S. Army vet. I served under him." "Under Mr. Braxton?" "Yes, ma'am. He dragged me out of a bombed-out convoy in Basra. I was 20. Thought I was dead. He made sure I wasn't." More movement in the gallery now. Another voice piped up. "I wasn't there with him, but I read about that mission. Everyone did." A woman from the back. "He's the reason half of Bravo Company made it home." Lenny didn't react. He just kept staring at the floor. You'd think they were talking about someone else. Judge Harper leaned back in her chair. You could see something changing in her eyes. The courtroom wasn't looking at a vagrant anymore. They were looking at a man who'd seen more than they could ever imagine and lost more than they'd ever know. But as the room began to piece together who this man really was, another question rose in everyone's mind. How the hell did he end up here? Judge Harper didn't say a word for a long moment. She just sat there, her hands clasped, her jaw clenched in thought. You could see something happening behind her eyes, a struggle between the black and white of the law and the weight of what stood before her. She turned to Lenny. "Mr. Braxton, I need to ask you something personal. You don't have to answer if you don't want to. Lenny looked up, tired but steady. Go ahead. You were honorably discharged in 1993, correct? He nodded. That's right. After that, what happened? Lenny gave a faint shrug. I tried to go home. That didn't feel like home no more. Price whispered, Sir, you don't need to. But Lenny kept going. I got married, tried school, but sleep never came easy. I'd hear stuff, booms that weren't there, voices I didn't recognize. VA gave me pills, but they made me feel like I was watching life through glass, so I stopped taking them. Figured I could fight it on my own. The judge asked softly, Did you get any help? Tried, but paperwork gets lost, calls don't get returned, and after a while, people stop seeing you. You become a problem, not a person. Silence hung in the air like fog. Harper glanced at the prosecutor, who for once wasn't flipping through files or prepping notes. Denise Rowan just looked at Lenny, jaw slack, fingers frozen mid-scribble. Price leaned forward. Your Honor, if I may, this is not a criminal case. This is a cry for help that went ignored too long. She nodded slowly, then turned to Lenny again. Do you have anywhere safe to go, Mr. Braxton, if you were released today? Lenny gave a sad smile. Only safe place I ever knew was that Humvee, and that got blown to pieces. He wasn't joking. He wasn't trying to win sympathy. He was just telling the truth, the way people who've lived too much pain tend to do, with brutal honesty and no hope of being saved. Judge Harper closed the folder in front of her. We'll take a recess. As the gavel tapped lightly, you could hear people whispering again. Not gossip this time, not pity, respect. But while the courtroom paused to breathe, one person in the hallway was already dialing a number, someone who knew Lenny's name, not from a file, but from a battlefield. 25 years ago, Leonard Braxton wasn't some forgotten man in a courthouse. He was First Sergeant Braxton, sharp-eyed, cool under pressure, leading men through chaos during the Gulf War. Back then, he had a presence, the kind that made soldiers stand up straighter when he walked by. He wasn't loud. He didn't bark orders like some sergeants. He led with a look, a nod, a calm voice that made you believe you'd get out alive if you just stayed close to him. The rescue in Basra was never supposed to happen. Intel was bad. A convoy was ambushed, pinned for nearly 18 hours. Braxton's squad wasn't even assigned to that sector. But he heard the distress call, looked his men in the eyes, and said, We go, now. Under the cover of night and a sandstorm that could skin your face. They pushed through enemy fire, pulled out 6 wounded, and drove 2 Humvees until they ran out of fuel, then carried the injured on foot. He didn't lose a single man. Photos of that night ran in papers across the country. There was a ceremony, medals, speeches, a parade back home in Dayton. But parades don't last. The transition to civilian life hit him like a wall. His wife, Janice, tried. She stayed through the nightmares, the long silences, the sudden bursts of rage he couldn't explain. But after 4 years, she took their daughter and left. Said she couldn't keep raising a family in a house that felt like a war zone. Lenny didn't argue. He couldn't even look her in the eye when she packed. He tried jobs, security, delivery driving, maintenance. He'd do fine for a month, then something would trigger him. A slammed door, a loud bang, a voice too close. He'd shut down or lash out. Employers stopped calling. One night, in 2007, he sat in a shelter lobby watching the TV. It was a news story about another veteran who took his own life after being denied care. Lenny turned it off and walked out. He never came back. After that, it was alleyways and park benches. Old military buddies tried reaching out, but he wouldn't answer. Said he didn't want pity. Said he didn't deserve help if he couldn't even hold a job. He stopped wearing his medals, but he never let go of the fatigue shirt. Said it reminded him of who he used to be. But the world hadn't completely forgotten about Lenny Braxton. Not everyone. And one of the people who remembered him had just heard his name on the phone. Court resumed after lunch, but something was different. The air had changed. Lenny was back at the defense table. Same coat, same shirt, same stare at the floor. But this time, people weren't looking at him like a criminal. They were watching him like a man who'd been chewed up and spat out by a country that promised better. Judge Harper tapped the gavel. We're back on the record. Lenny sat still. He wasn't expecting anything, wasn't asking for mercy. The prosecutor stood, cleared her throat. Your Honor, before we proceed, I've made some calls. That got everyone's attention. Denise Rowan didn't make calls unless she wanted something. I contacted the Department of Veterans Affairs. Mr. Braxton's file is complicated, multiple denied claims, several flagged appeals that were never processed, one even marked lost in transfer. She looked over at Lenny. I believe he was trying. The system just wasn't trying back. Lenny gave a small grunt. Ain't no room in the system for broke black men with memories they can't shut off. Harper raised her eyebrows. What do you mean by that? He looked up. You ask for help, they say you're unstable. You don't ask, they say you're fine. And when you finally break, they say you should have spoken up sooner. His voice didn't shake. It didn't rise. It just cut through the courtroom like a cold wind. Price leaned in. Lenny, why didn't you tell me any of this? Lenny shrugged. Didn't think it mattered. I stopped being somebody a long time ago. Just then, the doors at the back of the courtroom opened. A man stepped in, dark gray suit, buzzed haircut, firm jaw. He walked with purpose. Judge Harper looked up. Can I help you? The man raised a hand. Sorry, Your Honor, I know I'm late. I'm not here as a lawyer. He turned to Lenny. I'm here because he saved my life. Lenny squinted. I know that voice. It's me, Brian Keel, Kuwait. You pulled me out of a burning Jeep with a busted leg and still carried someone else on your back. Price whispered, Wait, Keel? The assistant district attorney for Lucas County? Keel nodded. Yeah, that's me, and I owe this man more than I can ever repay. The room was still again. Even Rowan looked surprised. Keel looked at the judge. I'm not here to argue. I just want to say this. If we let this man walk out of this room with nothing but a record, then we're all failing. But that wasn't the only surprise coming, because Judge Harper had made her own call, one that could change everything. Judge Harper didn't respond right away. She glanced at the bailiff and gave a quick nod. He stepped out without a word. Lenny looked around, confused. Something happening I should know about? Price leaned in. I'm not sure, but it seems like people are starting to remember who you are. Lenny gave a weak chuckle. A little late for that, don't you think? Keel, still standing, crossed his arms. Maybe, but late's better than never. Seconds later, the courtroom doors opened again. This time, an older woman entered. She walked slow but steady, short, natural hair streaked with gray, wearing a brown blazer with a gold pin over her heart, an army insignia. Lenny's eyes narrowed, then widened. Janice? She paused in the aisle. Hi, Leonard. The entire courtroom seemed to disappear. He stood, almost stumbled, and looked at her like she was a ghost. Why are you... Janice stepped closer. Your daughter. She found me last month. Said someone spotted you outside a church. I didn't believe it at first. I thought you moved to Kansas. I did, but then I came back. I was going to try and find you before the winter hit. Then this call came in from a judge's clerk. Price sat back, stunned. Lenny looked at the ground. I'm not the man you married anymore. Janice stepped up to the defense table. No, you're not. But I see parts of him in you. I always have, even when you didn't. Rowan looked toward the bench. Your Honor, may I ask what's happening here? Judge Harper finally spoke. This man's name, Leonard Braxton, came across my desk like any other, but I knew that name. Not from the news, from a letter. Years ago, my brother served in Desert Storm. He wrote home about a sergeant who gave him the courage to keep going when it got too hard. That sergeant was Lenny Braxton. She leaned forward. I called the VA. I called the governor's office. I called every contact I had. This man didn't need a jail cell. He needed a lifeline. Gasps whispered through the room. Then she turned to Lenny. Mr. Braxton, would you be open to entering a veterans treatment court program? Housing, therapy, medical care, and support. Real support. Lenny blinked. Y'all really think I'm worth all that? Keel answered without hesitation. You were worth that a long time ago. You just didn't hear it enough. Janice added, You're still worth it, Leonard. But even with the courtroom united in support, Lenny's answer still wasn't certain, and the next few seconds would decide if he walked toward healing or back into the dark. Lenny didn't speak right away. He just stood there, eyes bouncing from Janice to the judge, to Keel, then back to the floor. Everyone was waiting. I've been cold for a long time, he finally said. Not just my body, my spirit too. Thought maybe that's just how it ends for people like me. You're wrong, Janice said gently. That's not how it ends. Judge Harper leaned forward. You don't have to decide everything today, but the court can assign you to the Veterans Justice Outreach Program. You'd be partnered with a caseworker, get housing within 48 hours, and medical evaluation by the end of the week. Lenny rubbed the back of his neck like he didn't know how to receive the kindness. I ain't trying to be a charity case, Keel cut in. This isn't charity. It's justice, just a different kind than what you're used to seeing. Lenny exhaled, long, shaky, then sat back down. All right, I'll try. That one word, try, seemed to lift the whole courtroom. Price let out a breath and nodded, almost like finally. Judge Harper smiled slightly. Then it's settled. Mr. Braxton, your charges will be dismissed conditionally upon successful completion of the treatment program. You'll report tomorrow morning. I've already arranged transport. There was no clapping, no cheering, just stillness, respectful, heavy. Keel approached Lenny, stuck out his hand. I don't know if you remember everything about that night in Basra, but I do. You saved me. So if there's anything you ever need, ever, I'll be there. Lenny looked him in the eye, shook his hand. Appreciate you. I mean that. Janice leaned in and whispered, Your daughter wants to see you when you're ready. His shoulders slumped, but not in defeat, in relief. Price clapped his hand on Lenny's shoulder. We'll get through this together, Mr. Braxton. Lenny nodded slowly. Call me Lenny. But even as hope crept back in, the real test would come tomorrow, when Lenny had to face the world again, this time with no uniform and no hiding. The next morning, a gray van pulled up outside the Lucas County Veterans Resource Center. Lenny stepped out slow, clutching a small paper bag that held the few things he still owned. He paused on the curb, looking at the building. Clean windows, flag at half-mast. A young man in a polo greeted him at the door. Mr. Braxton, we've been expecting you. Inside, there was hot coffee, a folded cot, a schedule, a room with a lock. That afternoon, a doctor sat across from him. You've got what we call complex trauma, Mr. Braxton, but that doesn't mean you're broken. It means you survived things most people can't imagine. Lenny stared at the clipboard, then back at the doctor. I used to lead men through sandstorms. Now I can't lead myself across a quiet room without getting dizzy. You don't have to lead anymore. Just walk, one step at a time. Weeks passed, and for the first time in years, someone called him every morning just to check in. He met with other vets who looked like him, who understood. He started to laugh again, not loud, not often, but real. One Friday, Janice came by. She brought their daughter, now grown, with soft eyes and a nervous smile. They didn't cry. They didn't hug right away. They just sat together on a bench outside, quiet. You look tired, Daddy, she said. I'm working on it, he replied. Judge Harper checked in through Keel every few weeks. Lenny was sticking to the program. He hadn't missed a single session. One morning, at a public veterans event in Toledo's Civic Center, the mayor read a list of honorees. The final name, Leonard Braxton. He walked up, slow but steady, wearing the same fatigue shirt, but this time it was clean, ironed, and buttoned proud. No one clapped at first. They stood, every single person. Some saluted, others simply placed their hand over their heart. He didn't speak long, just a few words into the mic. I was gone for a long time. Not just from this city, but from myself. I ain't perfect, and I'm still hurtin', but I'm trying. If there's someone out there like me, someone who thinks it's too late, it's not. You're not forgotten. You still matter. And that's the truth this courtroom taught us, that behind every man sitting in the back row, behind every name in a file, is a story we haven't heard. Sometimes, all it takes is someone to stop and listen. Don't wait for the world to tell people they matter. Say it now. Remind them. Lift them up, especially the ones who wore the uniform, then got left in the dark. If you know someone like Lenny, reach out, ask, listen, share the story, let them know we still see them, and we always will.